Mr. Kevin O'Neill, who is a senior strategist with Kaizen Germany, Kaizen Gaming Germany, and he will be speaking about creating a viable and sustainable regulated iGaming market. Kevin, please.
Thank you very much.
And please remember to write any questions that you have in the Slido app. You can find the QR code on your badge.
Thank you very much. Wow, this is loud. Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you very much for returning from the coffee break. Rainer said he's ready, so let's get started. I'm at Kaizen Gaming, which is Betano. I'm here to give you the operator perspective, the perspective from online operators. Let me be clear, everything I say is about the online space. Creating a viable and sustainable regulated iGaming market. So question to the audience, do we today have a viable and sustainable iGaming market? You can say yes, because I think we do. Look at all of you here, look at all of us here, the operators, look at all the lawyers here, look at the affiliates here, everybody here. So clearly, and it's been like that for years. So clearly we do have a sustainable market. We're working on the next state treaty. So that answer from my side is yes. The answer to the question, is it successful? Well, that's maybe not the same answer. We've heard that addressed a lot, the black market figures, whether it's H2GC, whether it's the DIW study, whether it was the Schnabel study, whether it was the Handelsblatt research study. I don't think it's as successful as it could be. I think that's what we can agree on. So the question is, how did we get to where we are today? The second one is, what do we need to change to get there, to a better place? And perhaps most importantly, because we've heard a lot about that too today, I don't want to repeat everything, I'll try and address things from a different angle. The third question, how do we get there? 3 points to each question, I'll keep it short, I'm watching the time. And I have Peter Paul to remind me if I'm going over. How did we get here? Well, not through ill will, not through ignorance, not through incompetence. We got here through the best intentions. You all know the saying, perhaps, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, good intentions were here. But we have a few systemic issues in Germany. One, regulation. Jörg mentioned this already and others too. Regulation is a state matter. Regulierung ist Ländersache. And everybody talks about Germany, especially the Americans, especially the Brits. It's one country. No, it's not. It's the United States of Germany. And this United States of Germany makes it a little bit more difficult. In the United States of America, we don't have one regulation either. So we have 16 states, each of them with a vote. Each of them has to ratify the new state treaty in their parliament. You saw the timeline that was presented to the new state treaty. It's going to take years, and that's an aggressive timeline. So it requires compromise. Compromise on the lowest common denominator, so that we have a pan-German regulation. We had a regulation in Germany, a quite successful one in the state of Schleswig-Holstein. Others did not accept this, because Schleswig-Holstein took the liberty to do their own thing. Others did not follow. The learning from that was, let's have one that is a federally recognized regulation. Legally speaking, that was the wrong term, I know. A Germany-wide recognized regulation. And therefore compromises were made. Casino products are not even included in that. That's where every state carved out the right to do it themselves. And I think it was said before, to the best of my knowledge, the only state that has actually issued licenses, once again, not surprisingly, Schleswig-Holstein. So that was point one. Regulierung ist Ländersache. Point two, to this state treaty, we have applied a federal tax. And that was introduced for convenience. I spoke to the tax authorities back then, tried to explain to them. Somehow it worked for sports better than it ever will for slots. We saw the numbers before. Sports channelization is higher than the slots channelization. This tax is simply not appropriate for slots or for poker. We've heard why that is, and that RTPs had to be adjusted, therefore become unattractive for customers. It is because of this tax. It can work better. The tax discussion is starting. I'll get to that in my second point. 3, let's talk about the regulator. I should look at the regulator when I talk about the regulator. Thank you for joining us today. And let's take a step back, because everybody likes to pick on the regulator. In any country, not just in Germany. But let's take a step back and consider their position. In this room, we've got a lot of experienced people, I don't want to say old, like me, and chances are pretty good that at some stage in your career you had 2 bosses, or you were part of a matrix organization, and you were pulled in 2 directions, and it wasn't easy. I'm sure it was not fun. Now imagine 16 different constituents, 16 different, I don't want to call them bosses, but 16 very important stakeholders. I don't know how they do it. I liked Jörg's suggestion. Why not take a look at a federal agency that then is accountable only to the Bund? That'd be interesting. I really don't know how you do it. I'm impressed. 2 bosses was all I could ever handle. The second point, what needs to change to get from here to there? There being where we want to go. Again, 3 things. Of course, there are more reasons why it's not successful. Of course, there are more than 3 things we need to do. I understand that. I just tried to keep it to 3s, given that I have 13 minutes and 33 seconds. 1, we need a better balance between repressive measures and promoting measures. The Verbotspolitik, which has been followed, or prohibition, there is enough historic evidence, again, looking to the US, doesn't work so well. Promoting measures are something that encourages the players. Am I saying stop with the repressive measures? No, of course I am not. I like the suggestion that was made by Frwyczkiewski, paragraph 284 of the STGB. Sounds so innocent. What that is for the non-Germans here, it's paragraph 284 of the Criminal Code. It means you get thrown in jail. Norbert and Manfred from BWIN, Ewout has a few stories to tell about how that really changes your perspective when jail and arrest and handcuffs are in the cards. So I think that will be very effective at stopping or putting a real blocker to the black market. These repressive measures should be there for operators, should be there for the Googles of the world. I think that Christian's job would be a lot easier, our job altogether as an industry, if those repressive sanctions would be a lot more draconian and stricter. But for players, in my view anyway, we need to make the market more attractive. The black market is 1 click away. There are no barriers to switching. You're not going to be arrested for playing illegally. The days of not getting paid, I think, are over. There are lots of black market operators where you can play, not get into trouble, get your money back. You're laughing as a player. The state is not laughing. The licensed operator is not laughing. And we have seen that coercive measures do not work. Protecting players, yes, absolutely. But not, sie nicht strangulieren, as Dirk said. He explained it in more detail. Jörg pointed it out. So let's have some measures that don't create other problems. So there's 3 kinds of measures, right? Ones that simply don't work, others that work but create other problems, and the third ones that actually solve the issues. Well, operators know a thing or 2 about this, especially international operators who have experience from other markets. We can look to other regulations. We see what works and doesn't work. We can not predict history. We can look at what happened in other markets where this happened and therefore can project what's going to happen in Germany, what is likely to happen in Denmark. Brigitte is here. I was talking to Morten last week in Prague. That's not going to move things in the right direction. There are other ways. 95% channelization, the beacon of regulation in Denmark. Let's hope it stays that way. My guess is not for that much longer. So that was point 1, the balance between repressive and promoting measures. Point 2, let's address or take seriously player protection. Currently, fewer and fewer players are protected better and better, to the point where they will be so well protected that they will click away. Does that fulfill the objective of the state treaty, the declared objective, which is the one of channelization? Not in my opinion. Who's the addict's best friend? Who's our biggest competitor? If you ask any operator in this room who the single largest competitor is, in this market especially, but globally speaking, it is the black market. We saw the numbers, they're staggering. It costs taxes, it costs sponsorship for the sport, and it's always just one click away. So I really wish the GGL success. I think I speak for all of us here when I say we want to help you. That's why operators, large operators, are really investing a lot of time, effort, and money into identifying the problem, quantifying it so that we can fix it. Because better protection will be the result if we successfully fight the black market, more taxes, more investment, more support for sports, and more revenues for us operators. And thirdly, because I mentioned tax again, we see what works and what doesn't. Germany is the only country with a turnover-based tax. Everybody else has a revenue-based tax. The RTP had to be adjusted to accommodate this tax. It was predicted that it doesn't work. We see the numbers. It is refreshing to see that this debate is now starting on several fronts, on several levels, and the argument I like to make to just illustrate the point between the RTPs is whether you have 5% or 10+% is look at two gas stations on the same road. One of them sells gas for whatever gas costs here, let's call it 180, and the other one for 360. There's no penalty to going to either of them. They're literally right next to each other. Which one are you going to go to? There's no line either. There's a longer line at the one for 360 than at 180. So what are you going to do as a driver? I know what I would do. I have a gas-guzzling SUV. So changing this tax from turnover to revenue-based tax will bring more players, will bring more revenues, and that's a nice bonus to have. Final point. So how do we get out of this mess? How did I phrase it? How do we get to there? How do we get to there? Not what do we need to do. We heard a lot about that. I didn't want to be too prescriptive. Just to say I agree with everything that was said on this topic. No argument from my side. So how do we get to a new regulatory context? How about we start listening to each other? And I mean all of us, operators as well. Not automatically, oh no, this is bad, we have to get to the Maximalforderung and then the next Maximalforderung and then there's a compromise and no one's happy with it. How about we just discuss the issues and listen? And it's possible. I know it because I was there, I did it. It was Mr., and I'll mention the name because it was a long, long time ago and it's a nice story about him, Mr. Lieberoth-Leben. So I'm there in a meeting with him, we're talking about poker regulation in the context of the current state treaty, and his big concern was bots. So that players would get ripped off and play against machines. And he had a very long paragraph drafted. And it was very complex. And I said, isn't your concern that you always play, and I said at PokerStars at the time, at PokerStars you always play against other human beings. And he said, ja, das ist es, Herr O'Neill. Man muss gegen natürliche Personen spielen. I'm making it difficult for the translators, I apologize. You have to always play against a natural person. It was a sentence, and it covered everything. And then I think we agreed on the restriction of 4 tables. And I don't know what else it says in the state treaty, but the whole poker section is about half a page. So evidence exists that pragmatic solutions are possible in Germany as well. Because, and that was the beauty of discussing poker, nobody has a problem admitting that they don't have the first clue about what happens with poker, at least not technically, and doing that. But everyone's an expert on everything else. So 1, listen. 2, let's focus on the issue. Mr. Buchholz said that before, and it's been repeated a couple of times. Let's focus on the issues, the facts, and I'll add to that, and the desired outcomes. Not the objectives. The objectives too, of course, we have to focus on those. But the objectives could lead to a solution that has unintended consequences. So let's focus on the desired outcomes, avoid unintended consequences, Listen to those who have, and it's operators, but others too, many others. Listen to those with experience about what works, what doesn't work, and what looks like it works but doesn't really work. Again, strict measures, strict penalties for operators, encouragement for players. Why? Because we need the players. We all do. Otherwise, none of us have jobs. So I want to leave you with a request for all of us here. So regardless of what side you think you're on or are on, and regardless of all our differences, when it comes to fighting the black market, we're all on the same side. When it comes to competing against the single largest competitor in the world, because otherwise, well, we're going to lose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this, Kevin O'Neill.